Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to Citywide Blackout, your home for the best creators from around the world. For this episode, I'm chatting with author Joseph Falank for his new novel Renewal, out September 13th through BHC Press. This is a powerfully written and very honest story about a family coming to grips with the reality that their patriarch is afflicted with Alzheimer's. We look at how the main character, Malcolm, who has been separated from his family for 2 long years, reconnects with his father and adjusts to the role as his caregiver. We look at the subjects of Joseph's past works, including The Painted Lady and Disconnected, and the inspirations that led to them. Personally, I cannot wait to read Disconnected. It sounds wonderfully terrifying. And we also talk about some of his ideas for future works. That one I know you want to learn about. So kick back, relax, and enjoy. We'll be talking all about the soon-to-be-released book Renewal. This is out September 13th through BHC Press. It's going to be out in hardcover, paperback, and ebook versions. And I've just started reading this book, folks, and I am already very, very into it. And joining me now to talk about everything and more about this title is author Joseph Falank. Joseph, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. So why don't we start by just giving us a quick rundown as to what Renewal is all about?
Okay, so Renewal is about this guy. His name is Malcolm. He is a teacher. He gets a message one day in the middle of his class that his father's health is kind of taking a turn for the worse. His father is dealing with Alzheimer's disease, and now he's kind of getting into the end stages of that. He's becoming violent. He's forgetting more things. So it kind of becomes this like call to action where Malcolm has to decide, do I go home? He's had a lot of issues with his family, with his father. So going home is not an easy decision for him. So he ultimately decides that he is going to go home. He knows there's going to be a confrontation with his dad. He knows there's going to be a lot of the past brought up, and he knows he's going to be dealing with his father's memory issues. Like, if they make amends, is that going to stick?
I'd like to start with the theme of coping with someone who is suffering from Alzheimer's. Why did this condition become one of the themes of the story?
So initially, when I was coming up with the story, I wasn't immediately thinking of Alzheimer's disease. I wanted to do a story where we had a parent and we had a child, and there was going to be a role reversal. The child was going to have to take care of the adult, as that happens in so many people's lives. Looking into different ailments that the parent could suffer from, Alzheimer's kind of felt at first like a very easy decision to put on him, and it kind of felt cliche. But then I did some research into Alzheimer's, and it's so terrifying. It's not just forgetting, it's like identity loss. It's a person who is very aware that they are losing themselves slowly over time. So that's what hooked me into actually using Alzheimer's disease as the ailment for the father character.
Tell me about the father. What was his relationship like with the rest of the family, and how is he sort of dealing with realizing what lays ahead for him?
As you find out through the course of the novel, the character Dennis, he really struggles with this losing his identity. Like, there are times when he's not quite aware that he's making lapses, where he's having these mishaps with memory, and he's reminded of them. And it's very difficult for him. Prior to his diagnosis, I think everything was positive. Everything was great. He was everything that a father should be, right? Takes care of his family. He and his wife were together, but then you find out pretty early in the book, his wife, Malcolm's mother, she started losing her battle with cancer. And around the same time is when Dennis's Alzheimer's was diagnosed. So they're dealing with 2 separate battles, and they both know neither of them is going to win this. The mother goes first, leaving the father now alone, angry. He knows he's got this disease and will eventually take everything away from him. So I think this changes him, and that obviously affects Malcolm, who separates himself from his family. He knows it's not the right decision, but he just reacts instinctively.
Yeah. Well, loss like that obviously can be very devastating, and how you deal with it. There's no roadmap. It is for every
Right.
person a very unique situation. You mentioned earlier about doing research into Alzheimer's. Do you know folks, or do you yourself have any kind of real life experience with just being a caregiver?
I mean, I have two kids. I have not yet had to deal with I've not yet had to deal with anything with my own parents or my in-laws yet. Um, but I did through the course of doing my research, I do remember my grandfather, he was dealing with cancer himself when I was younger. And I remember because my mother would spend nights taking care of him. I remembered the story that she told us about. He woke up in the middle of the night one night and he was convinced he had to go to work at a gas station. Just woke up convinced he got up and he had to go to work. And it was like, wow, like so so powerful this disease can be to convince you of such a lie.
I've never had to deal with it myself in terms of being a caregiver, but you hear stories about people who they just kind of wander off in the middle of the night, and they're found like miles away, no idea what's going on, convinced, like you said, that they have to be somewhere else. How do you convey that kind of anxiety and that kind of just like what that person has to deal with in your story?
Basically just through the powerlessness. Like Malcolm, he doesn't know how to deal with this. He he especially since he's been absent for 2 years, he's not been in the thick of this with like his brother. The brother is the one who contacts him to tell him, this is getting worse, you need to come home. So I felt like um the powerlessness, but also like he's just being thrown right into the trenches. He's not coming in and it's, oh, dad's just forgetting a couple things. It's nope, dad is now potentially violent. You never know what you're going to get with him at any given moment. So that, like in the story, my hope is that what that does, it kind of creates a little bit of suspense, a little bit of tension, in that you don't know what to expect.
How is Malcolm's reconnection with his father? How does that go?
Not to spoil it, although I mean, you kind of can figure out they're going to reconnect, right? That's part of the book. I really did not want to make that too big of a focus. I kind of wanted that to resolve itself relatively quickly, because they have a task that they're working on together, and there's all like the Alzheimer's disease is always going to be this like antagonist. So rather than continuously drag on their conflict, I wanted that resolved as early as I could, because also with the Alzheimer's, you never know if that's really going to last. Like, is Dennis going to suddenly forget? Oh yeah, we made up, and will he go back to that? You haven't talked to me in 2 years. What are you doing here? So, kind of like an unreliable narrator. You never really know what's going on one minute to the next. Is this relationship finally fixed, or is it fixed right now? Is something else going to pop up later?
Hmm. How about the rest of the family? How do they deal with just the fact that Malcolm's been gone for 2 years and kind of away, like you said, not in the trenches for this?
His brother is pretty forgiving of it. I think he understands with what happened, because um, the source of the problem is that Malcolm got divorced. He and his wife just realized it was not going to work for them, and but that's not the way that his father and his mother did things. You don't give up. They came up at a time where no matter what happened, you stayed together. So those differences is kind of what drives them apart. But then it's also part of the disease that Malcolm is not quite ready to accept.
Okay.
So kind of just takes all of this on his shoulders and says, "No, I'm done," and he disappears. And the rest of the family doesn't necessarily hold that against him. They're kind of hoping that they can just win him back to come back home.
Does he have that same family devotion, though, when it comes to just being with the family?
I want to say he does. I want to say he does, because I think deep down he is a flawed, but he's a very good person. He knows when he's done something wrong. He knows what he needs to do. But I think just like all of us, sometimes we are very reluctant to face those hard struggles and have to do something that we don't want to, especially like with Malcolm. He knows now. He knows going home means conflict, it means struggle, but it also means facing his father, his journey is just about over in this life. And Malcolm is about to realize he's not going to have either parent. That whole like safety net we all have sometimes, those of us who still have both parents, once I feel like this book is kind of like a second coming of age. There's a coming of age when you have a child becoming an adult. But then when an adult doesn't have their parents anymore, now they're in the world without that safety net. So I think Malcolm knows he's not going to have that safety net much longer.
How do you think he would handle that, though? Yeah, he's been without it for a couple of years. Do you think he would see it as that big a loss?
Yes. Yeah. I think he wouldn't necessarily admit it to anyone outright at first, but I think internally he feels that. And I think like there are moments when it's him and his brother Randy and they're talking, and I think you see that real like the connection he really does have to his family, like in those moments when he can kind of let that out.
I want to go back a bit to the question on research. As you mentioned, you did a lot of research into this book, and of course, talking to writers, research is kind of the best / worst part of the process because it's cool to learn all these different things, but then like weeks later, you're thinking, man, I should probably like write something after spending so much time just diving into all these different stories. But what was research like for you? Did you spend like a lot of time on this before writing the book?
So the first things I did was I put out on my Facebook, writing this book, kind of wanting to look into Alzheimer's a little bit and in-home care, because it was really important to me that Dennis was at home, that all of this take place mostly at home. Like this book is very isolated in a way where a lot of it takes place in one setting. So I had probably a group of like 6 or 7 people reach out and say, I'd be glad to share my story with you. And so I would talk to them, and I got like little bits and pieces. I didn't want too much because like you said, you start doing all this research and then you're like, well, I should be writing. So what I did was I kind of got bits and pieces, and then I wrote the book. I did a couple drafts, and then I sent it to them and I said, hey, if you want to read it, let me know if I went too far in any places or if it's too unrealistic. And to my shock, everybody replied saying, nope, you've got it. No two Alzheimer's patients are ever alike. Like what one experiences is not what someone else experiences. They said this, like the things that he goes through, they had either heard of it, seen it themselves. So then I kind of felt like affirm, okay, this is ready then.
Yeah, exactly. It's always good to get that stamp of approval when it comes to the subject for your story, because you never want to put it out there and then get the email saying, yeah, like my father suffered from Alzheimer's. You were way off base. It's nothing like this. It's always good to have that like expert opinion, basically.
Yeah, I didn't want to create anything that was too over the line.
Mm-hmm. Did you wind up incorporating what people told you, either the people or the situations, directly into the story?
No. All of Dennis's experiences are fiction. I think I used there might have been a story about a different Alzheimer's patient that I think I did crib from one of the stories I did here, of course, changing the names, changing the situation just a little bit. But for the things that Dennis and Malcolm go through together, that was all completely invented.
What did you learn about the impacts to caregivers, especially after they're doing it for a while?
It was very important to me that Malcolm make mistakes. He meets a woman in the story, and you think that they're gonna hit it off, and he completely messes it up because he's so exhausted, he's so wrung out, he's so emotionally drained. He would like to get his life back on track with this meeting a new person, with being there for his daughter, which is another kind of subplot in the book. But because he's just constantly at the need of his father, he messes everything up, and he can't help it.
How does he take those mistakes? Is he the kind of person to be really hard on himself?
Yeah, like I think this Malcolm is someone who, kind of like myself, makes a mistake, internalizes it, doesn't necessarily vocalize it all the time, but it's like, man, I messed up. How am I going to fix this? And then he's so worried about fixing that one thing, he makes more mistakes.
So definitely kind of like a snowball character. Like he just screws up and it gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as I mentioned, I am already reading this book and definitely really, really enjoying it. And one of the things I caught was the level of detail. You are very good at painting a picture with your words.
Oh, thank you.
And I also like the care you took into even like the small kind of side characters. Like for example, Malcolm is a school teacher, and reading this story and interacting with the student characters, they really seem like real people. They're not just like space fillers. But that's a long-winded way to ask you, how do you know when you have a scene in the book nailed with regards to detail?
We're talking about the opening scene in the book, right, where
Yeah.
he is. So I was super worried in writing that as soon as I sold the book to someone, they would read it, they'd be like, no, this needs to go. Like, this has nothing to do with the rest of the book. So when I was writing that scene, well, when I was actually revising it, going back, because when I write the first draft, I write it however I want. So when I was editing it, I was like, oh, I need to make this so important that it's not going to get cut. And I really wanted you to see that despite the failures Malcolm has in all the other areas of his life, he's a good teacher and he is a good person. Like the lessons he's teaching his kids, they're talking about bullying, they're talking about the differences in kids the age that he's teaching. And it was very important for me that Malcolm comes across as, even though he's very flawed and not always likable, that he is a good person. And that I wanted the kids in his classroom to be real, so that, if they're real, then he seems even more real. And he's someone we can really latch onto for the rest of the book.
Now, I'm not a novelist at all, so my perspective is more from the reader. But I liked that opening scene because I felt it, number one, kind of eases us into the story rather than just jump right into the deep end and his father and everything he's dealing with. But I think it also kind of set the stage for Malcolm. We kind of learn a lot about this guy through those like opening pages.
Mm.
Do you usually open all your books like this?
I do try to open with something that sets the stage for what the main character is going to be like. Not necessarily start with what problem they're going to deal with through the course of the book, but open with something where, okay, I know who this person is very quickly. I know, their attitude, their feelings. I can pretty much see them in my head. That's what I want you to have, so that no matter what I give to you, you'll accept it a lot more if you like this person and you're with them through their struggle.
Do you like Malcolm as a person?
Do I like Malcolm?
Hmm.
I do like Malcolm. I sympathize with him a lot, because I don't want to say that I wrote me into him, but I think in every main character we put a little bit of ourselves into them, because we are flawed people. So why not put some of the flaws into that character, and then through them see how they get their redemption, or how they succeed.
Now, this is definitely not a spoiler question, but I do want to ask about later scenes in the story. As things get worse with Malcolm's father, did you find yourself feeling any trepidation dealing with those scenes? Like, okay, am I getting this right? Am I conveying these things properly?
I did kind of worry that it would get to be slightly unrealistic for those who maybe don't know a lot about Alzheimer's, or who think maybe I'm just going above and beyond for each instance where the Alzheimer's presents itself. Yeah, I was concerned, and but then, like I said, when I initially wrote it, I just kind of went all out. And then when I gave it to the beta readers, the people I talked to, and they were like, "No, you've got this." Then I felt like, "Oh, whew, okay." So, I can tinker with it here and there. I could maybe make something maybe make it funny, where just to kind of give you that relief, a little bit of humor, or maybe I can go just a little bit farther. Like, it's not a huge spoiler, but there is one time where Malcolm is constantly woken up in the night, and one of the times is he's basically rushing upstairs because he hears the shower on, and it's because his father woke up thinking he was on fire. And it's like, that's such a terrifying thing to wake up to in the middle of the night. And it's not like 4 or 5 pages long. It's very brief. And I did struggle with that part because I thought, wow, is that going too far? But then maybe sometimes it needed to go, to be really serious so that you know what he's dealing with.
I would imagine you can't pull your punches there because that scene probably is similar to what a lot of folks who care for patients with Alzheimer's go through.
Yeah, probably even worse. They probably go through worse.
Probably. And you definitely don't want to write a soft or kind of like nice story here because it's really got to be brutal.
Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about your other books. This is your 5th book out now. And reading about your other stories, those are Seeing, The Painted Lady, An Unexpected Visit, and Disconnected. The subject matter is really wide-ranging. I think actually Disconnected is the one I want to read next because that seems just like dark as hell. But I'm curious as to where the concepts come from and kind of how you know when you've got something that would make a great story.
Okay, well, so we'll go in order. Seeing was my first book, and when I decided that I wanted to write novels, because not to take up a whole lot with this part of the answer, but I grew up writing. I loved writing, but I never thought I would be a novelist. Like Stephen King writes novels. I don't write novels. But eventually it was my wife who kind of said to me, well, what is it that you want to do, with your life? I mean, I work in education, so I have a job, but I was like, I really want to write books. So she gave me a notebook, she gave me a pen, and to get me started, like back onto writing. And so I thought, well, okay, if I was going to write my first novel, what's my first novel going to be about? And I really wanted to do a coming of age. And the first picture I got in my head was of this boy running a race. He's running a race, but he's not mentally in the race. He's running towards something that only he can see. So then I had to start going backwards. Well, what does he see? And that's how I came up with the story for Seeing for the first book. For The Painted Lady, I wanted to do something completely different from my first book. I didn't want anyone to be able to compare them. I didn't want someone to say, oh, well, this is just like Seeing. So I wanted to do something where I had just become a father, and I thought of a person like someone who lost everything. Like this guy loses his wife. He found out early on he can't have children. The only thing he has is his art. So I wanted to come up with a story where his art kind of starts coming to life, but we don't know if it really is coming to life. So that was the basis of The Painted Lady. An Unexpected Visit was, again, because I'm a dad, like some of my first thoughts go to, well, how can I incorporate children into the books? So An Unexpected Visit was, what if there was this father who was just, maybe he just wasn't a good father, but then he wanted to make amends for everything he did wrong. So then An Unexpected Visit became about a father reaching out to his son to spend some time with them, but they have this really like awkward get together over this weekend, and it's the son who's like writing about it many years later. Disconnected came from actually a weekend that my family and I spent in the Adirondacks. We were in this house that was like in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have internet on our phones. We didn't have anything. And we were like laying in bed, and I thought, wow, if something happened to us, who could we call? No one would ever know. And immediately then it was like, oh, that's a book idea right there. And my wife, she likes the book because of how it turned out, but she hates that whole idea.
I would too, actually. It's like, that's a terrible thing to think, but it's a great concept for a story. And like I said, reading the description, I thought, man, that's a good story. I want to like read that. So do you have this like notebook full of like discarded story ideas?
I do have a notebook just full of ideas, and I would love to say I'm going to get to write them all, but then I'm always adding more. And I know like right now I'm trying to think of what my next book will be, but I also try to think of the what is my trajectory? What have I written about before? What is the next logical step? So like, I wrote Renewal. Well, my next book's not going to be about zombies. That feels like a huge jump in a totally different direction. So no, it won't be zombies. Maybe eventually, and I'll work, towards that. But um, yeah, I have a bunch of ideas, and it's really like, what do I feel most connected to that I could spend basically 2 years on and then see published.
Yeah, I don't know if a zombie story would be. I mean, I definitely think you could do a really good job with a zombie story, but I also think like, I guess I just don't know if that's you being used to the fullest extent, because you're so good at like crafting characters. Were you always that way though?
I think so. Like, um, it's just how it's the stories that draw me in. Like, I am all for. I'm not personally for stories that are huge and epic and go in different worlds and go in different places. I like 3 or 4 characters who are stuck in a situation and they have to figure their way out of it. They have to build the relationships with those around them. Like, those are the stories that draw me in.
So no sprawling fantasy epic for you.
Probably not. If I did it, if I did do something like that, it would be so like probably people wouldn't even like it because it'd be so personal that we would only follow a few of those like characters and we would only go to certain places. And yeah, I don't know if that's quite in my wheelhouse.
Maybe kind of like narrow the focus, make it about like 1 or 2 characters, not this huge like epic party kind of thing.
Right. Like, it would probably be like the initial person. It'd be like taking the Matrix and just making about Neo and Morpheus, and that's it. Like, just Morpheus teaching Neo, hey, you are the one, and I'm gonna prove it to you that you're the one, and that would be my book.
Hey, I read it. That sounds good actually. That sounds really good.
All right, I'm gonna make a note of that right
There you
now.
go. I actually did notice for this book, you actually dedicated this to your wife, and it sounds like she had a real integral role in you getting started as a writer. Did she ever give you like feedback on the book? Did she ever like read it and say, okay, this, and this?
So I am very lucky in that my wife is very honest. She will tell me if something doesn't work for her. So like when I say to people, oh, my wife, she loved it. That's not like oh yeah, you just showed your artwork to your mom and your mom loves it. No, she would be brutally honest if she didn't like it. Like I said, she hated the idea of Disconnected, but she loved the book for how haunting it was. That was her direct quote to me when she finished reading it. She's like, that book is haunting. And I was like, yes, I nailed it. Good.
That's a great quote for the cover.
Yeah, I don't know if you see my name on the book cover and then you see her name as the quote. I don't know how people would feel about that.
Pen name. Give her a pen name.
That's right.
There we go. So when it came to this book, did she have any feedback that kind of shifted the story, either one way or another?
No, actually, she didn't read it until it was quite late. I'm also very picky in when I have her read a book because my wife is not someone who rereads books. So I have to be like, I have to make sure that I am confident that I've got it, I've nailed it, and I can say, here's the story, take the time to read it. No, her feedback is always, I don't want to say like she asked me to change anything, because usually, like I said, by then I feel I've nailed it. I feel I've got it. Everything is justified. It's really like, do you just like it or not?
Has she ever said no to something, like a story idea or a book idea? She said, no, this would be terrible. Don't write it. It's awful.
She hasn't said no, but I bounce ideas off of her. Like, occasionally, oh, I have this idea, and I can tell from the reaction if it's something I should write or not. I had this idea, and even I'm not fully confident in it yet. I had this idea like a couple months ago. We were driving to my parents' house. We were on the highway, and all of a sudden I saw this flash, and I was like, "Oh, what was that?" And it was like just some transformer, like on some telephone pole that like just exploded, and it just for some reason that got me thinking. And I was like, what if we were these people just driving down the road and they saw something that they thought like, oh, was that an explosion? No, it couldn't have been, But then all of a sudden traffic ahead of them stops and people start getting out of their cars and they're armed. And it's almost like this like sudden takeover of kind of like how our world is right now. We have people who are on two completely different sides, like these extremists people. And I thought, what if they organize this one day where they just take everything over? Not necessarily to hurt, but just to prove that, hey, we could do this. And I thought, it's a terrifying idea, but it's too political. And I'm not going to reveal politically where I am. I just want what's best for every person. That's where I am. So that's not really on either side. But I thought, wow, like with the way our world is, I don't think I could write this and not piss somebody off. And I'm never looking to do that. But I don't want to write something so divided, even though we are divided as a people right now. But I knew when I bounced that idea off her, she was like, yeah, that's a little too much.
Yeah, like you said, I don't think you could avoid making that political in some fashion or other. At some point, you would be making very clear which side of the fence you're falling on.
Yeah.
It's a cool idea, though. Actually, I mean, I think it's a kind of a cool idea, but yeah. Right now, that's a dodgy thing to do.
Yeah, it's not an idea for right now.
Definitely not. So, then, what would you say your goals are as a writer? What do you hope people kind of take from your books?
My goal is always to make the reader feel something. I don't know if you've read any of the reviews for Renewal. I probably shouldn't, but I read them, and like some of these people are just like, oh my gosh, it was like I cried. It was sad. It was this. It was, and I was like, that's exactly what I wanted. Like I want you to read it and feel something.
Nice. So, with Disconnected, just abject terror.
Disconnected, I wanted to, yeah, basically, I just wanted to write this quick. Everything is just going right to hell for these people very quickly, and you're wondering the whole time, how are they going to get out of this? I would say that is probably the scariest thing I've written, even though like it's not monsters, it's not blood and guts, it's more psychological, and yeah, that to me is probably the scariest thing I've written.
Well, I'm definitely never going hiking in the mountains, so thanks for that.
You're welcome.
There you go. All right. So, release day at the time of this recording is only about 2 weeks away. How are you on release day? Do you really just dive right in full force?
I've been doing it all along. From the moment I knew that Renewal was going to be published and we had the date, I think immediately I was doing like, oh, it's 292 days, blah, blah, blah. And I would occasionally do a post counting down the days. I have been all in on this, and I will go as all in as I can. My biggest fear, like this is the hardest part for me, is the sell. I love doing interviews. This part is great, but I'm so awkward with the sell because that's not who I am. I'm not a person who's like, hey, buy my book, it's going to be great. No, I would much rather someone else read it and then they put their quote out there and I'm like, hey, look, this person loved it. Maybe you'll love it.
Yeah. Selling your stuff can be very hard to do, But I like how all in you have been, because I've seen some of your Twitter posts, and you're just like, doing these interviews. Only this much time to go. The book's out pretty soon. Clearly, you're very, very into this, because I know some folks, when it comes to release day, they're just like, nope. I just turn my computer off, chuck my phone down the drain. I want nothing to do with the outside world, because the stress is so intense.
It is, and there are some times where I wish I could do that because I'm not a very extroverted person. Like me in the real world is like super quiet. My father-in-law, he saw one of my other interviews and he's like, that's the most I've ever heard you talk. So this will probably be the second most he's ever heard me talk, because that's just me. I'm just quiet by nature. I take in everything. I don't necessarily always add to the conversation or start my own conversation, but Twitter I really like because it's very quick. You put out a little thing, and you hope somebody sees it. You can only do so much.
Exactly.
And I'll try to do as much as I can as we get there.
Do you think you've gotten better at doing release days as you've released more books?
Do I think I've gotten better with release dates? I think so. I can definitely tell you when The Painted Lady was released, my daughter she was just about a year old, and I was taking her out because I work in education. I'm off for the summer. That book came out, I think it was August 6th of 2015, and we were out for a walk. I was pushing her in her stroller, and I thought, wait a minute, my book came out today. And I totally forgot, totally slipped my mind, because I'm home, I've got my daughter, I lost track of days in the summer. So yeah, I think over time I've gotten better with the release dates.
That is hilarious. I love that story. Well, you know what you should do is, since this will be out during the school year, you can tell all your students, hey kids, tell your parents to get the copy of Renewal out right now.
You know what's funny about that is my students, they thought it was cool that I was getting a book published, but other than that, they couldn't care. They couldn't care.
Oh man,
I'm not like a celebrity to them.
We should. Man, if you're on teacher, I'd be like, oh man, I can't wait to check out his new book, because I was that kid in school. I was all about the books.
Yeah, they'll be like that later though. Later in life, like, oh yeah, I had this guy. He was a writer.
See, they're gonna wish that they had gotten their autographed copy.
I know.
Missed opportunities, kids. Missed opportunities. All right, so of course the big question is, what is next for you? What's the next book gonna be?
Well, I can reveal here publicly for the first time that BHC Press has asked me to submit for them for my next book. And I have 2 books that I will turn into them at the end of the year. And it could be one of them, it could be both of them, or it could be neither of them. We'll see. One of them is what I'm calling a short story novel called No Common Day. And I call it a novel because it's short stories of characters in the same town, but it hops around 2 different stories. Some of them kind of bleed into the other. You might be reading one story and you learn about a character from a different one. So it's basically the lives of all these people in one day. And then the other book is a slightly shorter novel called Gone. And quite simply, it's about 6 friends who gather at a lake house for an overnight, and they start to vanish one by one.
Now I can never go to a lake house. Thank you.
You're welcome. What places should I avoid? I'll make a list.
I'm actually going to a lake house for Labor Day weekend, so thank you. Quick, cancel! Oh my God. That's a good story, though, man. I like it. All right. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate this. And folks, one more time, September 13th, get your copy of Renewal. It's available in hardcover, paperback, ebook. Go to your local bookstore. If they don't have it on the shelf, order it. That's what they do. And if you want more information, you go to Joseph Falank, FALANK.com for more information. And while you're there, buy his other books. They're really, really good. And Joseph, looking forward to next time we talk for the next book.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so excited to have done this.
Picture this. You finished your first book and nailed it. The plot, the characters, all the twists and turns. This one's a winner, and all you need is the right cover. If you've got my art skills, this is the part where panic usually sets in. Enter the cover villain, hero to writers everywhere. Founded by noted author Remy Flagg, Cover Villain focuses on composite image covers for science fiction and fantasy writers. Give them the details, and they'll craft a cover using popular trends that everyone will want to see. But wait, you say, I've got ideas of my own. No problem, as Cover Villain loves a good collaboration. As they say, our goal is to put a little villain in every cover we make. Want to know more? Then head to covervillain.com and follow them on Facebook and Instagram. And that brings this episode to a close. Big thanks to Joseph for joining me. And once again, September 13th is the big day. Check this book out. You will not regret it. You can follow the show on Facebook under Citywide Blackout and Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max. Get to me at citywidemax@yahoo.com and check out the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, as well as every Saturday at 10 p.m. on Boston Free Radio. That's all for now, and I'll see you next time.